Daniel Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office on the 52nd floor, watching the city below move like ants. At 35, he commanded one of the largest business empires in the country. Blackwood Industries was his kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist and a heart of ice. The morning sun cast sharp shadows across his perfectly organized desk. Everything in his world had its place, including people, especially people. He had learned long ago that keeping distance was not just smart business, it was survival. His secretary knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "Mr. Blackwood, your new personal assistant will arrive in 10 minutes. Daniel turned away from the window. Has she been briefed about the rules? Yes, sir. No physical contact. Minimal personal interaction. Strictly professional boundaries. He nodded curtly. The rules existed for good reason. For 15 years. Daniel had maintained these boundaries with every woman in his company. It kept things simple, clean, and most importantly, safe. The new assistant arrives. Emma Rosewood stepped out of the elevator, carrying a coffee and a stack of files. She had prepared for this moment for weeks. Working as personal assistant to Daniel Blackwood was the opportunity of a lifetime. Even if everyone warned her about his strange behavior, she had heard the whispers. The Ice King, they called him. The CEO who never shook hands with women, never allowed them close, treated them like they carried some dangerous disease. But Emma saw it differently. Behind every wall, there was a reason for building it. The reception area buzzed with activity. Employees moved with purpose, their faces serious and focused. This was clearly a place where excellence was not just expected but demanded. "You must be Emma." Ah. A friendly voice broke through her observations. She turned to see a man in his early 30s with kind eyes and an easy smile. "I'm James Mitchell, head of finance." "Welcome to the fortress," Emma laughed. "Is it really that intimidating?" James glanced toward the closed office door at the end of the hall. "Let's just say Daniel takes some getting used to. But you seem different from the others. Maybe you'll last longer than 3 months." Before Emma could ask what he meant, the office door opened. Daniel Blackwood emerged, and the entire floor seemed to hold its breath. He was tall, imposing, with dark hair and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. His black suit was perfectly tailored, his tie straight, every detail immaculate. Emma felt her pulse quicken. She had seen his photos in business magazines, but in person, he was even more striking. There was something magnetic about him, despite the cold distance he projected. The first encounter, Daniel's eyes swept the room and landed on Emma. For a split second, something flickered in his expression, but it was gone so quickly she wondered if she had imagined it. "Miss Rosewood," his voice was deep, controlled. "My office. Now." Emma gathered her things and followed him, ignoring the sympathetic looks from other employees. The office was impressive, all dark wood and leather, with awards and certificates, covering one wall. But what struck her most was how sterile it felt, like a beautiful room where no one actually lived. Daniel moved behind his desk without offering her a seat. "Your duties are outlined in the file my secretary provided. Follow them exactly. No deviations, no creative interpretations." Emma nodded, studying his face. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the edge of his desk. This was a man holding himself together through sheer will. "I need these contracts reviewed and organized by priority," he continued, gesturing to a stack of papers. "The Johnson merger requires immediate attention." As he leaned forward to point at specific documents, Emma noticed he was careful too. Maintain distance. When he handed her the files, he released them before her fingers could touch his. It was deliberate, practiced. "Sir," Emma said carefully, "may I ask about your preferences for scheduling meetings?" "Schedule them." "What assistants do?" His tone was dismissive. Emma bit back her first response. Instead, she smiled. "Of course. I just wanted to ensure I handle things exactly as you prefer. Some executives like buffer time between meetings, others prefer them back to back." Daniel stared at her for a moment, as if surprised by her thoughtful question. "Buffers. And I don't take lunch meetings." "Understood." Emma made notes on her tablet. "Anything else I should know about your working style?" He was quiet for so long that Emma looked up. Daniel was watching her with an unreadable expression. There was something almost vulnerable in his gaze before the walls slammed back down. "Just do your job, Miss Rosewood. That's all I require." Breaking the rules over the next few days, Emma settled into her role. She quickly learned that Daniel Blackwood was brilliant, demanding, and utterly devoted to his work. She also noticed the careful way he moved around her, the measured distance he maintained, the slight tension that appeared whenever she came too close. It was on Thursday morning that everything changed. Emma was rushing to deliver an urgent document when she found Daniel struggling with his tie in the reflection of his office window. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his hair slightly mussed as if he had been running his hands through it. The board meeting was moved up 30 minutes, he muttered to himself, his fingers fumbling with the silk fabric. Without thinking, Emma stepped forward. "Here, let me help." Her hands reached for his tie before either of them realized what was happening. The moment her fingers brushed against his neck, Daniel went completely still. The touch was electric. Emma felt it too, a shock of awareness that made her breath catch. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Daniel's skin was warm beneath her fingertips, and she could feel his pulse racing. Then reality crashed back. Daniel jerked away so violently that he knocked over his coffee cup. The hot liquid spread across his desk, soaking into important papers. "Don't." The word came out harsh, almost desperate. "Don't ever touch me." Emma's hands flew to her chest, her heart pounding. "I'm sorry. I was just trying to help." "Daniels." The face had gone pale. He was staring at her like she had done something unforgivable, his breathing uneven. "You don't understand. No one touches me. Ever." The raw pain in his voice made Emma's chest ache. This wasn't about arrogance or control. This was about fear. "Mr. Blackwood, I didn't mean any harm." He turned away, his hands shaking as he tried to clean up the coffee. "Just go, please." Emma wanted to stay, wanted to understand, but the broken look in his eyes told her to retreat. She backed toward the door, her mind racing with questions. "I'll reschedule your morning meetings," she said softly. He didn't respond, but she saw his shoulders sag slightly, as if her kindness was almost too much to bear. The investigation. That afternoon, Emma found herself in the break room with James, trying to make sense of what had happened. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment her skin had touched Daniel's, the way his entire body had reacted. "James," she said carefully, "can I ask you something about Mr. Blackwood?" He looked up from his sandwich. "Shoot. Why doesn't he let women touch him? Please don't tell me it's just because he's particular." James was quiet for a long moment. "You touched him, didn't you?" Emma nodded. "How did he react? Like I had burned him?" James sighed. "Look, Emma, I've worked here for 8 years. In all that time, I've never seen Daniel let any woman get close to him. There are rumors about what happened before I started. Here's something about a woman who destroyed him, but he never talks about it." Emma thought about the pain she had seen in Daniel's eyes. "He's not cold, is he? He's protecting himself, smart girl." James smiled sadly. "But be careful. Daniel's walls aren't just high, they're reinforced with steel. Many have tried to break through them. None have succeeded." That evening, Emma sat in her apartment, unable to get Daniel out of her mind. She kept remembering the moment of contact, the electricity that had passed between them. He had felt it too, she was certain. But whatever had happened to him in the past had made him build these impossible barriers. Emma had always been drawn to challenges, to puzzles that needed solving. But Daniel Blackwood wasn't a business problem to be fixed. He was a man carrying wounds so deep that even the gentlest touch felt like an attack. Still, something inside her refused to give up. Behind that ice-cold exterior, she had glimpsed something warm and real. And despite every logical reason to walk away, Emma found herself wanting to know the man behind the walls. The challenge accepted the next morning, Emma arrived at work with new determination. She would be the assistant Daniel needed, professional and efficient. But she would also be patient, kind, and present. Sometimes the strongest walls crumbled, not from force, but from gentle, persistent warmth. Daniel was already at his desk when she arrived, his tie perfectly straight, his armor firmly in place. He didn't look up when she entered. "Your schedule is clear until 10, Emma said. setting his coffee at the exact distance he preferred. "The Morrison contracts are ready for your review." "Thank you," he said stiffly. Emma turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. Blackwood?" He looked up reluctantly. "I want you to know that I respect your boundaries. But I also want you to know that I'm not going anywhere." For just a moment, a surprise flickered across his features. Then the mask was back in place. "We'll see," he said quietly. As Emma left his office, she smiled to herself. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Daniel Blackwood might think his heart was made of ice, but Emma had felt the warmth beneath, and she was willing to wait as long as it took for the thaw to begin. 3 weeks had passed since the tie incident, and Emma had become an expert at reading Daniel Blackwood's moods. She could tell by the set of his shoulders when he was frustrated, by the way he tapped his pen when he was thinking, and by the slight softening around his eyes when he was pleased with her work. What surprised her most was how often that last expression appeared. Despite his cold demeanor, Daniel was beginning to rely on her in ways that went beyond typical assistant duties. He asked for her opinion on contracts, trusted her to handle sensitive calls, and even occasionally shared a dry comment that might have been humor, but he still maintained his careful distance, and Emma respected it. She had learned to hand him documents without their fingers touching, to stand exactly 3 feet away when speaking to him, and to never make sudden movements that might bring them too close. Today, however, the universe seemed determined to test their carefully constructed boundaries. Emma was carrying a stack of files when her heel caught in the carpet. She stumbled forward, papers flying everywhere, and instinctively reached out to steady herself. Her hand landed squarely on Daniel's chest as he stepped out of his office. For the second time in 3 weeks, they were touching. But this time, Emma didn't pull away immediately. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palm, could see the way his pupils dilated as he looked down at her. The air between them crackled with tension. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but she still didn't move her hand. Daniel's voice was rough when he spoke.
"Emma."
The way he said her name, soft and almost reverent, made her stomach flutter. His hand started to rise as if he might touch her face, but then reality crashed back. He stepped away so abruptly that Emma nearly stumbled again. "Pick up the files," he said curtly, his professional mask sliding back into place. But Emma had seen what lay beneath it. The hunger in his eyes, the way he had leaned into her touch for just a moment before pulling away. Daniel Blackwood was not as immune to her as he pretended to be. The charity gala 2 days later, Daniel dropped a bombshell that changed everything. "I need you to accompany me to the Children's Hospital charity gala tomorrow night," he announced without looking up. From his computer, Emma blinked. "As your assistant? As my date?" The words hung in the air between them. Emma's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "May I ask why?" Daniel finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "The board expects me to bring someone. You're convenient." Emma raised an eyebrow. "How romantic." Was that almost a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth? "This is business, Miss Rosewood, nothing more." Of course, Emma agreed, though something warm was spreading through her chest.
"What should I
wear? Something appropriate for a $5,000 plate dinner?" Emma's eyes widened. She had exactly one cocktail dress in her closet, and it definitely wasn't appropriate for that kind of event. Daniel must have seen her panic because his expression softened slightly. "There's a boutique on 5th Avenue. Tell them to charge it. To my account. Mr. Blackwood, I can't let you buy me a dress. You can and you will. This is a work requirement." His tone brooked no argument. That evening, Emma found herself in the most exclusive boutique she had ever entered. The sales associate, an elegant woman named Claire, took one look at the card Daniel had given Emma and immediately sprang into action. "Mr. Blackwood has exquisite taste," Claire murmured as she pulled several gowns from the rack. "He specifically requested something in deep blue or emerald green." Emma's heart skipped. Daniel had given specific instructions about her dress. That didn't sound like mere convenience. When she tried on the midnight blue gown, Emma barely recognized herself. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, the silk fabric flowing like water. The color brought out her eyes and made her skin glow. "He'll be speechless," Claire said with satisfaction. Emma hoped she was right. The night of revelation, Daniel was waiting in the lobby of Emma's apartment building when she came down. And the look on his face when he saw her was worth every moment of nervousness. His jaw literally dropped before he caught himself. "You look ... double quotes," he started, then seemed to lose his words. "Appropriate?" Emma suggested with a small smile. "Stunning," he said quietly, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. The gala was everything Emma had expected and more. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, the city's elite mingled over champagne, and the live orchestra played softly in the background. Emma felt like she was in a fairy tale. What she hadn't expected was how natural it felt to be at Daniel's side. He introduced her to business partners and board members with quiet pride, his hand hovering protectively at the small of her back without quite touching. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple. "You're good at this," Daniel murmured during a quiet moment between conversations. "At what?" "Playing the part?" But there was something in his eyes that suggested he didn't think she was playing it all. The evening was going perfectly until Victoria Sterling arrived. Emma knew who she was immediately. Victoria was the kind of woman who commanded attention. The moment she entered a room, tall, blonde, and devastatingly beautiful, she moved through the crowd like she owned it. And from the way Daniel's entire body tensed when he saw her, Emma understood exactly who this woman was. "Daniel," Victoria purred as she approached. Her red lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How wonderful to see you, Victoria." Daniel's voice was ice cold. Victoria's gaze shifted to Emma, assessing and dismissive. "And who is this charming little thing?" Emma felt her temper flare at the condescending tone, but before she could speak, Daniel stepped closer to her. "This is Emma Rosewood, my partner," he said firmly, the word partner carrying weight that made Emma's heart race. Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Partner? How ... interesting. I didn't know you were in the market for new relationships, Daniel. Especially considering your ... limitations." Emma saw red. Whatever this woman had done to Daniel, she had no right to throw it in his face now. Before Daniel could respond, Emma slipped her arm through his and smiled sweetly at Victoria. "Those limitations don't seem to be a problem anymore," she said with false brightness. "Isn't that right, darling?" Daniel looked down at her in surprise, but Emma saw something else in his expression: gratitude, and perhaps something deeper. Victoria's smile faltered. "Well, how lovely for you both." After she walked away, Daniel and Emma stood in silence for a moment. Emma was acutely aware of her arm still linked with his, of the warmth of his body beside hers. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Who was she?" Daniel was quiet for so long that Emma thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Someone who taught me that trust is a luxury I can't afford." Emma's heart ached for him. She could hear the pain in his voice, the old wound that Victoria's presence had reopened. Without thinking, she squeezed his arm gently. "Her loss," she said simply. Daniel looked down at her, something shifting in his expression. For a moment, the walls he kept so carefully in place seemed to waver. The almost moment later that night, Daniel drove Emma home in comfortable silence. The evening had been a success by any measure, but Emma could sense Daniel's internal struggle. He had led her closer tonight than ever before, had called her his partner, had let her defend him. But she could feel him preparing to retreat again. When they reached her building, Daniel walked her to the door like a proper gentleman. They stood under the soft glow of the entrance light, and Emma didn't want the night to end. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I had a wonderful time." Even with Victoria's dramatic entrance, Emma smiled, especially because of that. "I enjoyed putting her in her place." Daniel's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "You were magnificent." The compliment, so simple and sincere, made Emma's breath catch. They stood there looking at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Daniel's hand started to rise toward her face, and Emma's heart hammered in anticipation. But then he caught himself. His hand dropped back to his side, and the shutters came down over his expression. "Good night, Emma," he said formally. Emma felt The dismissal like a physical blow, but she had seen the struggle in his eyes. He wanted to touch her, wanted to let her in, but something was holding him back. "Good night, Daniel," she said softly. As she watched him walk away, Emma made a decision. She was falling for Daniel Blackwood, walls and all. And somehow, she was going to find a way to show him that not all women were like Victoria Sterling. Some were worth the risk of trusting again. The morning after the next morning at the office, Daniel had retreated so far behind his professional facade that Emma wondered if she had imagined the moments of connection from the night before. He was polite but distant, careful not to make eye contact for too long. Back to handing her documents without the slightest chance of their fingers brushing, but Emma had learned to read the signs. The way he paused when she entered the room. The slight softening of his expression when he thought she wasn't looking. The fact that he had kept the picture from the gala on his desk where any passerby could see them together. Daniel Blackwood was fighting a war with himself, and Emma was determined to be patient enough to let him win it. Because she had seen the man behind the ice, he was worth waiting for. The challenge intensifies. The days passed. Emma began to notice small changes in Daniel's behavior. He started asking about her weekend plans, though he always framed it as ensuring she would be available for work. He began keeping her favorite tea stocked in the office kitchen. And sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him watching her with an expression of such longing that it took her breath away. The walls were cracking. Slowly, carefully, but they were definitely cracking. And Emma was going to be there when they finally came down. One afternoon, as she was organizing his schedule, Daniel spoke without looking up from his work. "Emma, yes. That night at the gala, when you called yourself my partner." He paused, finally meeting her eyes. "Did you mean it?" Emma's heart stopped. This was it. The moment when she could either play it safe or take the leap. "Yes," she said. "Simply, I meant it." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, and Emma saw a dozen emotions flicker across his face. Fear, hope, longing, and something that might have been love. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted quietly. "We'll figure it out together," Emma said, taking a small step toward his desk. For the first time since she had known him, Daniel didn't step away. The ice was beginning to thaw, the morning after their breakthrough conversation. Emma arrived at the office with new hope. Daniel had admitted he didn't know how to handle their growing connection, but he hadn't pushed her away. For the first time, it felt like they were on the same side of the wall instead of standing on opposite sides, but she should have known that. Daniel Blackwood never made anything easy. He was already at his desk when she arrived, his expression closed off and professional. The vulnerability he had shown the previous afternoon was nowhere to be seen. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Emma said carefully, testing the waters. "Miss Rosewood." His voice was formal, distant. "I need these reports reviewed by noon." Emma felt her heart sink. He was retreating again, pulling back into the safety of his corporate armor. But she had learned patience in the weeks since starting this job. She would wait for him to find his way back to her. What she didn't expect was the phone call that would change everything. At 11:30, Emma's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but when she answered, the voice was unmistakably familiar. "Hello, Emma. This is Victoria Sterling." Emma's blood ran cold. "What do you want?" "To talk about Daniel. Meet me for lunch at the Meridian Hotel. 1 o'clock. "I don't think that's a good idea." Victoria's laugh was sharp. "Oh, but I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. It's about Daniel's little problem with women, about why he can't bear to be touched." Emma gripped the phone tighter. "Are you talking about?" 1 o'clock, Emma. Don't keep me waiting." The line went dead, the revelation against her better judgment. Emma found herself sitting across from Victoria Sterling in the elegant restaurant of the Meridian Hotel. Victoria looked perfect as always, but there was something calculating in her eyes that made Emma's skin crawl. "You came," Victoria said, sipping her wine. "I wasn't sure you would. What do you want?" Emma asked directly. Victoria smiled. "To save you from making a terrible mistake. You think you're falling in love with Daniel, don't you?" Emma didn't answer, but Victoria continued anyway. Let me tell you a story about the man you think you know. 15 years ago, Daniel Blackwood was different. He was warm, trusting, romantic even. He believed in love, in partnership, in building a life with someone. Emma felt sick, but forced herself to listen.
Oh.
We were engaged. The wedding was planned, the dress bought, the future mapped out. Daniel gave me everything, access to his accounts, his business secrets, his heart, and I used it all against him. Victoria's smile turned cruel. See, I was working for his biggest competitor. Every conversation we had, every intimate moment, every secret he shared was passed along to people who wanted to destroy him. The night before our wedding, they launched a hostile takeover using information I had provided. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. You betrayed him. Completely. But that's not the worst part. Victoria leaned forward. The worst part was what? I said when he confronted me. I told him that every touch, every kiss, every moment of intimacy had been a lie. That his touch repulsed me. I had to force myself to endure his hands on me. Emma felt tears sting her eyes as the pieces fell into place. Daniel's inability to touch women, his fear of physical contact, his belief that closeness meant vulnerability, to betrayal. I destroyed him, Victoria continued with satisfaction, and he's never recovered. He can't touch a woman without remembering my words, without feeling that revulsion I claim to feel. You think you're special, Emma? You think you can fix him? He's broken beyond repair? Emma stood up abruptly. You're wrong. Has he touched you, Emma? Really touched you? Or does he still flinch away like you're poison? The words hit there. Mark, because they were partially true. Daniel still struggled with physical contact, still pulled away when the walls came down. He'll never be able to give you what you need, Victoria said softly. He'll never be able to love you the way. Woman deserves to be loved. I made sure of that. Emma walked away without another word, but Victoria's voice followed her. Ask him about the panic attacks, Emma. Ask him what happens when he tries to get close to someone. The confrontation Emma returned to the office shaken but determined. She found Daniel in his office working at his computer, looking perfectly controlled and professional. But now she could see the signs she had missed before. The rigid posture, the careful way he held himself, the subtle tension that never quite left his shoulders. Daniel, she said quietly. He looked up, and something in her expression must have alerted him because his eyes sharpened. What's wrong? Had lunch with Victoria? Daniel went completely still. The color drained from his face, and Emma saw his hands tremble slightly before he clenched them into fists. What did she tell you? His voice was barely above a whisper. Emma closed the office door and moved closer to his desk. Everything. About the engagement, the betrayal, what she said to you. Daniel stood up abruptly, turning away from her. Then you know why this can't work? Why we can't work. No, Emma said firmly. I know why you're scared. But I also know that what she did to you doesn't define who you are now, doesn't it? Daniel's laugh was bitter. Do you know what happens when I try to touch someone, Emma? When I let someone get too close? He turned back to face her, and Emma saw raw pain in his eyes. I can't breathe. My heart races, my hands shake, and all I can hear is her voice telling me how disgusting I am, how repulsive my touch is. 15 years, Emma. 15 years, and I still can't escape it. Emma's heart broke for him. Daniel, she was right about one thing, he continued, his voice growing stronger. I can't give you what you deserve. I can't be the man you need me to be. And what if you're wrong? Emma challenged. What if I get to decide what I need? She took a step closer to him. Daniel immediately stepped back. See? He said desperately. I can't even stay close to you for a conversation. Because you're fighting yourself, Emma said. Because you're so busy protecting yourself from pain that you can't see what's real. She took another step forward. This time, Daniel didn't move back, but she could see the effort it cost him. Tell me you don't feel anything when I'm near you, Emma said softly. Tell me there's nothing between us, and I'll walk away right now. Daniel stared at her, his breathing uneven. Emma, don't do this. Tell me, she insisted. I can't. The words came out broken. I can't because it would be a lie. Emma reached out slowly, giving him time to move away. When he didn't, she placed her hand gently over his heart. She felt him tense, felt his breath hitch, but he didn't pull away. "Your heart is racing," she whispered. "I know." "Are you thinking about what?" Victoria said. Daniel closed his eyes. "I'm thinking about you." The breakthrough, Emma kept her hand on Daniel's chest, feeling his heartbeat gradually slow as he focused on her instead of his fears. "She was wrong about you," Emma said quietly, "and she was wrong about your touch." Daniel opened his eyes, looking down at her with such vulnerability that Emma's breath caught. "How can you be sure?" "Because I've been waiting for you to touch me since the day I met you," she admitted. "Because every accidental brush of your fingers sends electricity through me. Because when you held my arm that night at the gala, I felt safer than I've ever felt in my life." Daniel's hand came up slowly, hesitantly, to cover hers where it rested on his chest. "I've wanted to touch you," he confessed. "God, Emma, I've wanted to touch you so badly it hurts. But every time I try, I hear her voice." "Then let my voice be louder," Emma said. "Let me tell you what your touch really feels like." She moved their joined hands to her face, pressing his palm against her cheek. Daniel's eyes widened, but he didn't pull away. "It feels like coming home," Emma whispered. "It feels like safety and warmth and everything I've been looking for my whole life." Daniel's thumb traced her cheekbone, and Emma saw wonder in his eyes. "You're not afraid," he said in amazement. "Only of losing you." Something shifted in Daniel's expression. The fear was still there, but it was being overshadowed by something stronger. "Love. Emma." He said her name like a prayer. "Yes, I love you." The words hung in the air between them, precious and fragile and real. "I love you too," Emma whispered. Daniel's other hand came up to frame her face, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear. When he kissed her, it was with 15 years of suppressed longing, with the desperate hunger of a man who had finally found his way home. The grand gesture 1 month later, Emma was at her desk when the entire office suddenly went quiet. She looked up to find Daniel standing in the middle of the floor, holding a microphone that someone must have brought from the conference room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel said, his voice carrying across the floor, I have an announcement to make." Emma's heart started racing. What was he doing? "For 15 years, I've let fear control my life. I've kept people at a distance, built walls around my heart, and convinced myself that I was better off alone." The entire office was riveted. This was Daniel Blackwood, their ice-cold CEO, standing in front of everyone, looking more human than any of them had ever seen him. "But then Emma Rosewood walked into my life and changed everything." Emma felt tears spring to her eyes as Daniel's gaze found hers across the room. "She broke down every wall I'd built, challenged every fear I had, and showed me that love isn't about perfection. It's about finding someone worth being vulnerable for." Daniel walked toward her desk, and Emma stood up on shaky legs. "Emma," he said, his voice softer now, but still carrying across the silent office. "You saved me from a life of ice and isolation. You taught me that touch can heal instead of hurt, that trust is possible, and that some people are worth the risk of loving." He dropped to one knee right there in front of her desk, pulling out a ring box that made Emma gasp. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am that you never gave up on me?" Emma was crying now, but she didn't care. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Daniel. Always yes." The office erupted in cheers as Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. As he kissed her in front of everyone, Emma realized that the Ice King had finally learned how to love without fear. The happy ending 6 months later, Emma walked down the aisle toward the man who had become her whole world. Daniel waited for her at the altar, tears in his eyes and love written across his face. As they exchanged vows, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't been easy. Daniel still struggled sometimes with trust and vulnerability. But he fought those battles now with Emma by his side, and that made all the difference. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel cupped Emma's face in his hands and kissed her with all the love he had learned to give. The ice had finally melted completely, leaving only warmth and love and the promise of forever. As they danced at their reception, Emma whispered in Daniel's ear. No regrets? Only one, he said. Emma's heart skipped. What? Daniel smiled, the genuine, unguarded smile that was hers alone. That it took me so long to let you break down my walls. Emma laughed, pulling him closer. It was worth the wait, and as they swayed together under the stars, Emma knew that. Some love stories were worth fighting for. Some walls were worth breaking down, and some men were worth the patience it took to heal their hearts. The Ice King had learned to love again, and Emma Rosewood had found her forever home in his arms.